Technology, diversity, wine, the redwoods, and everything in between. Welcome to the Northern California Bay Area, and one show takes you inside the real estate that makes it all happen. This is By the Bay.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Dan and Chetta back with another episode of By the Bay. I am really grateful that you are here. And today we're talking about residential solar. And my guest is Dylan Mathias, who is the co-owner of First Response Solar. He and his brother Chaz are the owners and founders of First Response. And just a quick note that they did the solar installation on my house. Came highly recommended from, I'm not sure how we got connected. Somebody connected us. Either way. And you have a background in real estate as well. So Dylan, thanks for being on the show. Welcome to By the Bay. And really want to dig into, like, a lot of clients are talking about solar. Should they get it? What are they doing? And you're the guy. So introduce yourself and your company, and let's dig into, like, the tactical, why should someone get or not get solar and that sort of thing.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm Dylan. I co-own a real estate or solar company with my brother. We small company. We run a run crew purposefully, just to make sure we're involved and making sure things are done right. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. We only do Sonoma County, and we do residential solar.
Only Sonoma County, only residential.
Yep.
Awesome. So, like, literally only rooftop, or do you guys do other type of installs?
Yeah, we do ground mounts. So country properties, not enough roof space, we'll do it on the ground. Haven't done any carports, but pretty much roof or ground.
Cool.
Two main. Yeah.
Nice. So we made the decision to get solar, I don't know, a year and a half ago, something like that. Yeah. And, it was mostly just an economic thing. Like, our PG&E bill is X if we buy the system, because you only do owned systems. You don't do leased systems, right?
Correct.
Right. So we made that decision, found you guys. You guys did a great job. And so our decision was purely economical. It was just our PG&E bill is too high, and we'd rather have the electricity that we're using be generated on our roof and, kind of be more self-sufficient.
Absolutely.
So I guess it was kind of ecological as well, but mostly economic,
yeah.
Right? So walk me through, like, why do people choose to get solar, and what's that decision look like when they're calling you and they're walking the site? How do you advise them to move forward or not based off of their property?
Yeah. So, I mean, ultimately, people look at it different ways. There's some are straight economical, then there's some people that want to do the right thing for the environment. So ultimately, what I've seen is a lot of times it comes down to economical making sense, because at the end of the day, you want something that's also going to benefit you long term. Sure. Even if you are doing the right thing. So ultimately, when I go out, I always go out to someone's site. Most companies now, they do it over a computer.
Right.
There's a lot of things you can't see over a computer, one being the electrical panel, and that's the huge main thing, because in solar, we're restricted to a lot of requirements. With PG&E, they have their own code book, as well as the city or county. Right. So there's a lot of things with the electrical panel that we are constrained by. Yeah,
that you just brought back that memory. Like, we had to replace our panel because we had an old, like, Zinsco panel that was a fire hazard and not a good thing, and, like, not compatible with kind of the upgrades that we're looking to do. So we had to replace our panel prior to you guys coming to do the install.
Yep, right. Absolutely. So that's the main thing. And a lot of companies, they do it over they'll size system over the computer. They can get somewhere in the range, but then once someone signs a contract, they'll come out and say, "Oh, you need a new electrical panel. It's going to be an extra, amount of money," which is not a small chunk.
And it could be a lot, depending if you have to, like, rerun the lines or whatever you're doing.
Exactly. Especially with PG&E now, they're making it very hard to upgrade your panel, so it can be a very large chunk of money to do something like that. So it can make or break a job.
Right.
But the main things I look at when I go out to a customer site, obviously shading, age of the roof. Obviously, if you have 7 years left in your roof, and the system's not going to pay for itself until 7 years, either you got to replace your roof now, or don't do the job at all, or just know that there's going to be another cost in 7 years because you're going to have to take the system off when you put on a new roof.
Right.
And those same things, I've walked away from jobs where I've said your roof, it's probably got 5 years. I'm not a roofer, but it probably has 5 years left on it. And I just don't feel comfortable warranting our work for 10 years, knowing that the roof's probably not going to last that long.
Right. Yeah, because I hadn't really thought about. At one point I thought about that, right? Because we had to have that conversation about our roof. But I guess it makes sense that you might do both at the same time, like put on a new roof and then put solar on right after.
Yeah, I mean, I think your roof was pretty new, but in terms of, it makes a lot of sense with new roofs because most roofs last about 25 years. Normal comp roofs and the panels and inverters up on the roof also have a 25-year warranty, so everything should
kind of last around the same amount of time.
Yeah.
What happened? I mean, the solar technology has been around for a while, but not 25 years on like accessible, like consumer household installs, right?
It has. It was started getting really big back in like 2008, 9, 10.
Okay.
That's when it started really kicking off. But you look at their systems that are 20, 25 years old.
Okay, so we're kind of getting to that point where a 25-year warranty. How much more efficient are the panels today than they were, 10 or 15 years ago?
They're quite a bit more efficient. They don't degrade as much as they used to. But in the past 4 or 5 years, there hasn't been really any huge advancements from what we've seen. Most of it's been a lot of times to get higher wattage because panels, for marketing purposes, more or less, have to go up in wattage. We've seen panels grow in size, so the actual dimension of the panels have grown. It's not necessarily that they become a lot more efficient, but if you look at a panel from 20 years ago versus now, they become a lot more efficient.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, the technology, locally here, Enphase Energy is here in town.
Yeah.
And, they're doing the inverter, right? So maybe you can explain to someone who doesn't know, like, how does it actually work?
Yeah. So ultimately, kind of how it works is the sun puts off DC energy. We use AC energy in our houses. So there has to be a component that accepts the DC energy, which is the panel. And that those panels, there's different size panels, so they accept different amount of wattage. And then you have to have a component called the inverter, and that inverter actually converts the power from DC to AC so that we can then use the power from the solar panels in our house. So you need a panel, and then you need an inverter, which is, we use Enphase. They're started here in Petaluma, and now they're a huge company, but they use microinverter technology, so there's a little inverter for each panel. Instead of 10 years ago, we were installing, it's called a string inverter. So all the panels on the roof are strung together and they come down to one singular inverter, and that converts all the power for all the panels up on the roof.
What's the advantage or disadvantage of using the micro inverter as opposed to the string inverter?
Yeah, I would say the only companies I see still using string inverters are like Sunrun, kind of the bigger ones you see in Home Depot, Costco. Only thing I can think of why they're still using those is they're cheaper, and because they have a lot of overhead as a company, they have to use those to be competitive as a company. But main reason why we switched back installing them back in like 2016, the microinverters have a 25-year warranty versus most string inverters have a 10 to 12-year warranty. They typically go bad around that time frame, string inverters. And then the other main one is with shading up on the roof. With the old inverters, SolarEdge is kind of a mix between a micro and a string inverter, but for a straight string inverter, if one panel is shaded or one panel has dirt or one panel went bad, the whole system's affected by that one panel.
Because it's all chained together.
Yep, so they're in series. Whereas with the microinverter, if one goes bad or a panel goes bad, you're just affecting that one.
Right, because we had a inverter die on us, right? Which was like just a fluke, it happens, right? Yep. And we noticed right around the same time because we're looking at like the app that has like all the real-time data. Yeah. And like one panel was just dead. Yeah. And like I texted you, I think I was like, hey, will you take a look at this? Because either the connection's wrong or we've got a bad inverter. And you're like, oh yeah, it's unwarranted. We'll order a fresh one. Yep. So I mean, you're probably one of we probably replaced 3 of those inverters in the last 5 years. How lucky are we, huh? But it's nice because you can see that on a string inverter. There's no per panel monitoring, so at the inverter down at the side of your house, you would see a decrease in production, but there's no way to tell what panel has the issue. So you could be spending a whole day testing each panel, figuring out. So we knew exactly what the problem was. You're looking at the app, you're like,
Yep.
bad inverter.
And we send it into Enphase. Their engineers can look at the back end. They approve a new inverter, and we run one truck roll. So it saves customers a lot of money long term.
I think you guys came out like on a Saturday morning. I didn't even know that you had come and gone because you just went right on the roof and were gone before I even knew it.
Yeah,
which is great, and it's amazing service. So, so let's go back to like the listener is, a homeowner, and they're seeing the neighbors getting solar on their house and all this stuff. Like, so walk us through, like, what are the major decision points? How does like the PG&E relationship work now? Because there's some recent changes with that.
Yep.
And I also want to know about, I'm curious about like the battery technology.
Yep.
Right. So let's start with like, let's go into like the PG&E stuff. So how does that relationship work? Because there's a bunch of different plans that you can have depending on when you got your system. So talk to me about that.
Yeah. So I guess I'll just go history, kind of the different agreements with PG&E. Before, I think it was 2015, any system installed before them, they're going to be on a NEM 1 plan, which is net energy metering, the first iteration.
Number one. Yeah.
So under those plans, pretty much PG&E didn't make any money off those customers. If you were, just for example purposes, if you were pulling power from PG&E and they're charging 40 cents for 1 kilowatt of power, if you send it back from your solar to them, you'd get a 40-cent credit.
So it's a one-for-one exchange.
One-for-one exchange. So pretty much those customers, that's the best agreement you could be on. The caveat with that is you got a 20-year grandfathering, but if you ever added panels to your roof, they would kick you out of that grandfathering and move you to a new grandfathering.
Okay.
So that was the best agreement. Then after 2015, from 2015 till 2023, if you install your solar then, you're looking at NEM 2, which is net energy metering 2. That was still a really good agreement. Pretty much you lost about 2.5 cents on each kilowatt. So if you are buying a kilowatt from PG&E, you're paying 40 cents. If you're selling it back to them, you are getting about 37.5 cents. So it's still really good. That's why with that agreement, you can add a couple extra panels on your roof to cover future loads or to offset a little bit more of your bill.
Got it.
Now things are very different. Pretty much instead of getting 37.5 cents under the net billing tariff, which is the third iteration, pretty much average throughout the year, you're probably getting between 5 and 8 cents for that power instead of 37.5 cents. So now
say that again.
Yeah.
So instead of getting 37.5 cents per kilowatt hour, you're getting 5 cents?
Yep. So now pretty much the only way it makes economic sense to install solar is by adding a battery. So instead of right now with your system, you just send all the excess back to PG&E.
Right.
They turn around and sell it to your neighbors that don't have solar for their retail rates, and they make a little chunk on it.
Yeah.
Now you want to try to not send any power and not use any power from PG&E. So you're trying to go as much off grid as possible.
Was that done? So who makes that rule?
The CPUC, which is they govern PG&E. They are the ones that ultimately decide on it, but they have pressure.
Right.
It's all political.
So what's the reason for that type of change? Is it to incentivize people to get batteries and get off the grid and be less reliant? Or is it because PG&E has a profit motive and they're trying to make more money off of?
I mean, a little bit of both. We knew a change was going to happen because solar was getting a little bit too good to be true, because how much PG&E over the last 4 years have increased prices. You could get, between a 4 and a 5.5 year payback, depending on some 6, but depending on how much shade and whatnot of your house. But it was getting a little too good to be true. So we knew it was going to have to change. It changed quite a bit. We weren't expecting that big of a change. Mm-hmm. But I can see it from both ends of the spectrum a little bit. Whereas PG&E with solar, you're sending you pretty much have a bunch of households that are sending a lot of power back to PG&E throughout the middle of the day, and they have to manage that power and then pay good rates for that. So the whole point of this new agreement is so that you are pretty much more stabilizing the grid. And it's now all based off of pretty much a graph that's called the avoided cost calculator. And so PG&E in September between 5 and 7, when they really need power, if you send power back to them from your battery, you get like $2 a kilowatt. But there's sometimes during April where they're going to pay you $0 for sending that power back to them. So it averages out. So ultimately, it's just a change where before you're getting 4.5 to 5.5 year paybacks. Now it's going to be between 7 and 8, depending on, and that's for one battery type. There's another battery where if you want backup for your house too, it's going to be a longer payback. Yeah.
So talk to me about the batteries, because we didn't do battery, but I'm like fascinated by that idea.
Yeah.
And so talk to me about like what is the status of that technology? What does it roughly cost? And at what point does that become like necessary for a homeowner?
Yeah. So under the new agreement, it's going to be necessary. We're pretty much going to have to install some type of battery, and there's really now 2 ways to install a battery. There's one way, which is kind of the typical way most people think about installing a battery, which is when PG&E turns off power, you're going to be able to use the battery and the solar to go off grid and still have power at your house. That's going to be the more expensive way to install the battery. And now there's a way, it's called a grid forming battery. There's a lot less wiring you have to do. You just plug it into the solar box that we have to install already. And what you can do is you can use the battery. So at nighttime, instead of pulling power from PG&E, you're just going to pull from the battery. And then throughout the day, instead of sending the power back to PG&E, you'll just refill the battery. That way is going to be quite a bit cheaper. But if PG&E turns off power, just like with solar right now, you're not going to have power. So if they turn off the grid, you're pretty much, there's no transfer switch. So there's no way to block the power from going back to PG&E. So they have a rule that says the inverters have to shut down and stop producing power.
That makes sense, right? Because if you have excess power, it goes back into the grid, and if it's not being managed, then you can mess up the grid.
Yeah, and if they turn off power, people want to be able to work on the lines without the fear of those lines being hot. So if they pretty much have a requirement that says if the grid's dead, those inverters have to automatically shut down and stop producing power. Then you can add a transfer switch and do some rewiring of your house. If you have that transfer switch to block the power from going back, then you can obviously go off grid from there.
Okay, so roughly, obviously not going to hold you to it, but the cheaper option, what does that roughly cost?
I mean, different batteries can do different things and cost different amounts. We install a battery that is iron phosphate, which is a little bit, I would say, on the higher end, but lasts a lot longer than other type of batteries. For the savings batteries that are not for backup purposes, those are probably going to be before the federal tax credit, which is 30%, depending on where it is in your house, how much wiring you have to do. I mean, for an easy one, I would probably say around like $11,000, and then you get 30% back.
Okay.
The other ones, you're pretty much having to rewire someone's whole house, add a transfer switch, which is more expensive. Those ones are going to be almost probably double that.
Okay, like 20-something thousand.
Yep, and then you get 30% on that. But doing all the rewiring plus the transfer switch is going to almost double the cost.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that battery technology continues to evolve.
Yeah.
Especially now that if it's necessary, it seems like that innovation will pick up and there'll be a lot more options, and the cost will probably come down over time.
Absolutely.
Which is cool.
Yeah.
If you have an existing system like us and you wanted to add a battery, you can do that after the fact, right?
Correct. So you can add a battery without losing your 20-year grandfathering. You just cannot add more solar capacity.
Okay, we have no more space on our roof, I don't think. That's funny. So talk to me about those tax incentives and rebates. What's the current status of that? Because there were some changes with that with one of the bills that passed, right?
Yeah, so it was going to be completely gone at the end of this year. I think it was supposed to drop to 22% this year and then be gone after that. With that, I think it was the Inflation Reduction Act that they passed. Pretty much it's 30% for the next 10 years. And then it goes to 26.
That's a federal tax credit. Comes right off your tax bill.
Yeah, so it's a dollar for dollar credit. So if you pay the government, $20,000 every year and you got a $20,000 tax credit, you're not going to pay them anything. If you did pay them, they'll give it back to you as a rebate. Obviously, I'm not a CPA.
But the basics of it is it comes right off your federal tax liability based off of your project.
Yep.
Which is really cool. it's interesting to me that there's not more of an incentive. There's all this, maybe this is going to go off the rails here, but there's all this talk about energy independence and sustainability, and like household solar is probably the answer to fix that.
Yeah.
Right. So it's crazy to me that we're spending billions of dollars on other things. And if we just did like a 80% tax credit or something, like really did incentivize people, like you need to do this.
Yep.
We could probably become energy independent pretty quickly.
Yeah. And the main thing now is also having a stable grid, because if you have batteries at your house, you're able to provide power to the grid when it's needed the most, because you always hear every single year when it gets really hot, the brownouts.
Yeah.
That's because so many people are using AC,
right,
that pretty much PG&E does not have enough power to provide
but PG&E could socialize that and pull the power in from a bank of batteries that they don't have to own or maintain.
Correct. So they can, as a homeowner, you could send the power back, get compensated for that, and so it stabilizes the grid as well as, So I mean, it's right now there isn't too many incentives besides 30%. There are some battery rebates, but they're very specific. Like you have to be on medical baseline with PG&E. You have to be have 2 or more power shutoffs or be in a high fire threat area. So there's only very few people that can apply for it. I think we have 1 person right now that can apply for that. So
it's one of those goofy things where if we really wanted to fix the problem, like it's right in front of us, we can just do it, but we don't want to actually fix it. We want to talk about it and, make it a political thing. It's like, just make it super affordable for people to have solar. Make sure every house that makes sense to have it has it.
Yep.
And then we could probably fix our energy problem in 10 years.
Yeah. And the cost is not going to go up the way it's been going up.
Right.
It's been crazy. The last probably 6 years, I would say we probably had a 100% increase in energy prices.
Oh yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah.
It's been crazy, but we'll see.
And it's getting hotter, so people are running their air conditioning, more regularly and so on. So,
I mean, one thing doesn't fit everything, because PG&E's big argument is they can install solar for cheaper out in Nevada and then bring the power here. And I can see that you can, if you're doing a huge, huge field.
And they should do that.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. But they're also not considering the cost of how much it's going to cost and how much power they're losing to transmit the power here.
Sure.
So I think it's a blend of both, and one thing's not perfect.
And those sites like that, if you're describing, those should go to power the big cities that don't have that much roof space per person, right? If you have a 50-story building, that's a very small roof considering how much power is being used. Like, so that's where that should go. But in the rural area, the neighborhoods that we would live in, we should have our own thing. We have plenty of rooftop space. Otherwise, it's just going to waste.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I want to understand the value of these types of systems. Mm-hmm. So if you're a homeowner, you're looking at increasing the value of your property. You're only doing purchased, like household owned systems, not leases.
Yeah.
If you spent $30,000 on a system, right, including a battery or whatever that situation is, depending on what, you're going to take a 30% tax credit on that. So it's really net costing you $21,000, right?
Yep.
How much value is adding to your house, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's an arbitrary number, because it obviously, just like anything, it's going to be the value that whoever's buying it perceives the value in.
Yep.
I think solar's become such a common thing on houses. Before, I'd say, 12 years ago, people were like, oh, what's solar? I don't know. But now people understand it. They know the value of it. So it holds a lot more value if you own it. I would say it's at least $1 for dollar. Whatever you spend, you're going to get that back. I would say before the federal tax credit. So if you spend $30,000, it's going to probably add $30,000 to your house. But obviously that's arbitrary, depending on the person, especially with batteries, and especially in the last 5 years with how many power outages we've had. Generators and batteries have added a lot of value to homes because people saw value.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So give me some advice for homeowners, like maybe a couple tips that you would suggest that they that they do if they're looking at getting solar, if they're shopping around for solar? Give us some consumer advice.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is making sure the products, because there's a varying quality of products out there, making sure that what's being installed. And a lot of companies, they'll send out a quote where there's not much in it. They don't tell you what panels they're using, what inverters they're using. They just say, we will install a panel or we will install an inverter, and they'll install whatever they can get their hands on. So I'd say really ask those questions about what is going to be installed in my house, who's installing it, are you subbing in the work out? Because there's a lot of companies that they're just there to sell systems, and then they'll sell it, or they'll have anyone install it. But those are the main things. And then also the company, what's their reputation? Are they going to be there to warranty your work? Are they going to be responsive? Because there's a lot of companies out there where they're really good at selling systems, but then once they're installed, it's really hard to get them back out to the warranty work. So
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's like pretty typical experience for a lot of trades and other services, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing is that not all solar is created equal.
Yes.
And understanding, right? Understanding that there is a difference between panels and inverters and how the system is set up. So that's kind of quality, number one, and then customer service and this is a long-term relationship that you're going to have with this company over time, because bad things happen.
Yep.
Things break.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the main thing is, for our company, our customers have my cell phone number, my personal cell phone number. So if something goes wrong, I'm getting a call on a weekend. So there's a vested interest that we're going to be installing really good products, that we are going to have that long-term relationship and be there, because I don't have another phone number.
Right.
I'm giving my only phone number out. So we have an office line, but I don't give that out in terms of that. So it's definitely, there's different qualities out there in terms of what you get.
Okay. Any other advice for someone who's looking at solar, things that they should be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, the other main thing, I don't think we talked about it, is, owning versus leasing. And then there's a third one called the power purchase agreement.
Yeah, talked about that.
They all serve different values. We have chosen not to do PPAs, which are power purchase agreements, or leasing. Reason for it is we could probably, as a company, make more money doing that, but I just don't, it's not in the best interest of the homeowner. They have value in some sense. If you don't pay federal taxes, that may be the better option, because you can't take the 30% federal tax credit. So a PPA or lease may be better than that.
So what's the difference? What power purchase agreement means what?
So pretty much a power purchase agreement means that it's similar to a lease, but a little different, where a company will come in, they're going to install product on your roof. They own the product. So they're pretty much just renting your roof, and they're going to sell you power at a little bit less than whatever PG&E is charging. So if PG&E is charging 40 cents, maybe they'll pay you, or they'll sell it to you for 35 cents or 32 cents. But they're going to have escalators in their contract that says every single year we're going to increase rates. So, and the other main thing is, because the contractors installing the equipment, they get the 30% federal tax credit. So the homeowner gets nothing.
Okay.
Same thing with a lease. If you're leasing a system, the contractor is installing the equipment, so they get the federal tax credit, which is 30%. So they're pretty much just renting your roof, and you're going to have to pay them on a lease a fixed monthly fee, plus whatever PG&E charges you. So you'll still get your PG&E bill, and then you'll pay them. So let's just say your PG&E bill is $250 with the lease. You may still pay $150 fixed fee to the leasing company, plus then whatever PG&E is charging you on there.
For whatever you're pulling from the grid.
Yep. And now under the current agreement, there's really, like with your bill, it's super easy to zero out someone's bill, because you can add a couple more panels to the roof.
Yeah.
Now it's really, I shouldn't say impossible, but it doesn't make economic sense to zero someone's bill out 100%, because we're looking at the golden numbers like around 80 to 85%. Because in the wintertime, if the solar is not producing as much, you're going to be reliant on the grid at some capacity of the year. So you're going to be paying some amount to PG&E.
Okay. And then, so that's a power purchase agreement. A lease is just, you're leasing it, you don't own it, and you're paying a fixed lease amount, and then you use the power that you use, and you pay PG&E for what you pull from the grid.
Correct.
Kind of basically.
Yeah. In a sense, yeah.
But you don't get the federal tax credit for that.
Which is the huge thing, because if you 30% of the whole cost of the system is that's really why buying it makes it more beneficial to buy, because you get that 30% plus adds value to your house, whereas a lease or PPA doesn't really add value to your house. It actually, I would say, in a sense, decreases the value of your house a little bit, because
create some problems for lending environment.
And when you're buying it, you have lending. When you're buying the house, you have to go through the whole
transferring the lease, and
Absolutely.
the buyer has to be willing to take that on, and
Yep.
it gets a little complicated.
Yep.
From the lending perspective, I much prefer people just own it.
Yep.
Makes it very simple.
Yep.
So, any other advice? Anything else that we should know about where solar is going and what we should be looking for?
I mean, not really. It still makes a lot of sense to install solar. You're probably looking at if you have no shade in your house, depending on how big your bill is. I just sent one out this morning that was a 6-year payback. It was a little bit bigger of a system, but you can still, especially if you're looking at converting things in your house from gas to electric, it makes a lot of sense still. I would say if your bill is below $120 a month, it may not make as much sense because of the added cost of the batteries.
One thing I really like is that you're willing to say no and walk away and say, like, this doesn't make sense for you to do. Like, if you really passionately want to do it, we'll do it for you. But we just want you to know that this doesn't pay back for 15 years. So if this is like a environmental thing that you're so passionate about it and you have to do it, okay, cool, we'll get on board with that. But if we're just talking about, does this make sense for me economically? Like, we're telling you it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and that's what I tell every customer. I say, obviously, I'm the sales guy for our company, but I also an owner. So I have a vested interest where we've seen jobs where a company installs it, and then 3 months later, we're out there removing the system and reinstalling it because they installed it on a roof that was 18, 20 years old, and there was a leak. So I have a vested interest in making sure, because if I do something, I can't go to another company next year. You're stuck. The customer is stuck with me for better or for worse for the next 10 or so. I mean, for the next foreseeable future, as long as the system lasts. So I have a more vested interest to make sure customers are happy, because that's the worst thing that could happen is in 3 years, hey, you told me to do this, and now I have to re-roof my house.
Nice. So. Yeah. Well, we were thrilled with your service and really appreciate you and your crew. You guys were super respectful of the space and just did a really great job. So thanks for that. And we'll make sure that we put your contact info and your only one phone number that you have in the show notes. So if someone has questions, they can get a hold of you. And if they want to have a project estimate done, they can reach out to you. And how far is the backlog right now? Are we thinking 6 months to get a system done, or what does it look like right now?
Yeah, I mean, we're pretty backed up, because pretty much to get under the last agreement, all people had to do is submit the paperwork and had a signed contract. So if we took all of our contracts, we're currently booked out into like next March. But,
oh, wow.
Yeah. But with that being said, some people are not in a huge rush because we have 3 years to install the system.
Okay.
So we have openings that we can do this year. So if someone needs to get it done this year, we can make that happen. It's just we're still working through the backlog from the last agreement.
Well, that's great. Congratulations. That's great success, and it's nice to know that you guys are, full pipeline and got lots of projects in the works, and you guys are finding success. So congratulations. And you might have to expand to a second crew, I guess, huh?
Yeah. At some point, probably, yes.
Cool. Right on. Well, hey, thanks for being on the show. And if anyone has any questions about solar, we'll make sure they get to you. And again, thanks for being a great vendor and taking good care of us.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
For sure.
All right.
Stay up to date with Bay Area real estate. Hit subscribe now if you haven't already. Did you enjoy this episode? We love reviews in the Apple Podcasts app. We'll read yours on the show. This is By the Bay.
Lending Ear Media.